Information shared on the following program is for general information purposes only. It does not constitute legal, tax, investment, or other advice, nor is it intended to recommend any particular investments, products, or financial instruments. Always seek advice from your financial advisor, attorney, or accountant with regard to investment, legal, or tax questions.
Worried about spending your last dime in a nursing home? You should be.
Welcome to the only show in the country dedicated to helping savers worry less about money, the WorryFree Retirement, with offices in Louisville and Bowling Green. Your host, five-time author and fiduciary, Tony Walker.
Well, depending on the statistics you read or look up online, there is a greater and greater likelihood that you could wind up spending your last days and possibly your last dime in and on a nursing home. Well, welcome, folks, to the WorryFree Retirement. I am your host, and as one of my recent prospective clients once referred to me as, that little man in the sweater vest, Tony Walker. And today we are continuing down this financial road regarding the perils of actually living too long. And before we get into the show, I want to address that whole sweater vest thing. For those of you who don't know this, television really does make you look bigger and taller, and my wife would even say actually more handsome, Tony, than you are in person. As far as the sweater vest goes, this thing started years ago, and I don't even remember why. I used to wear the suit and tie thing. Here's an old shot of me years ago on the television show Your Money Matters. I'm all dapper, and I don't know what happened. I put on the sweater vest once, and it just felt comfortable. Now, yes, even in 95-degree heat, you'll see me maybe walking around in this thing. I just can't shake it. But you know what? There's something magical about this sweater vest. In fact, I've told my staff when I don't wear it, I feel like there's something missing. It would be like Superman trying to fly without his cape. Oh yeah, what a disaster that would be. So it just doesn't work for me, so you're stuck with the little man in the sweater vest today. All right, anyway, back to our subject of living longer than you think and winding up in a nursing home. Pleasant thought, isn't it? But it is kind of funny. We think about subjects like this and living longer and longer, and if you've been watching this show for the last several weeks, we've been addressing this whole idea of longevity risk, but here we are, and we're trying to figure out how to stretch this old life out further, whether it's more prescription drugs, whether it's more exercise, whether it's more dieting, strange remedies that somebody comes up with, or oils or whatever. Assuming we do accomplish our objective of living longer, what we're basically doing is increasing the likelihood of running out of money. In case you're just joining us again, for the past several weeks, we've spent this situation going into several of the risks created by longevity risk. Again, longevity risk just means because we're living longer, we increase the likelihood of running out of money. Again, actuarial science tells us that, let's say you're a 65-year-old couple sitting there nonchalantly watching this show, there's a 50-50 shot that one of you is going to make it to age 94. Folks, that's almost 30 years. There's also a 25% chance one of you will make it to age 100. So again, living longer creates more risks. Risk my granddad never even conceived of worrying about when he retired in 1978. Now let's go over these risks briefly before we get into the meat of the show. We covered last week's sequence of return risk. We won't cover that again in any detail. We're going to talk about next week the idea of stock market risk. In a couple of weeks, we're going to talk about interest rate risks and the effects of interest rates. By the way, you're going to see this in a couple of weeks. Did you realize actually that if you have a long-term mortgage, interest rate risk, in other words, if interest rates go up, actually that's going to be a good thing for you? That's going to be a really interesting show. But the risk we want to talk about today, our fourth risk to living too long, is one that most people really do fear, and that's what we call long-term care risks. And again, this could be getting sick or ill, and we say winding up in a nursing home, but you could get very sick or ill and able to stay home. But either way, we refer to that as long-term care risks. Now, when I do mention the words nursing home, what does that really evoke in your mind? Some of you might say, man, that's the worst sound I ever want to hear. And before we kind of get on the thought of going in a nursing home, let me say this. My father at a very young age was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and ultimately spent the remaining years of his life in a small nursing home located outside Bowling Green, Kentucky. The nursing home industry, for the most part, I think does a wonderful job. And sometimes I know we gripe about the nursing homes, but let's face it, folks, you're putting your folks or your loved ones in a nursing home because you and I cannot take care of them at home. So we're asking somebody to do something that really is almost an impossibility. So I look back at my dad. They checked on him regularly. They took care of his basic needs. They tried to feed him. They had shelter. I think all in all, they did a really good job. The whole point was, though, still, I don't think anybody wants to end up like my father, staring aimlessly in the ceiling and not be able to eat and have to have assistance for everything. But that could happen, folks. That could happen to you or I. Now, again, as we think back about the scenario of having to go through a nursing home, maybe you have had loved ones. Maybe you're experiencing this right now. I kid with my wife. I say, Susan, my dad died of Alzheimer's. He had 2 sisters that have passed away as a result of Alzheimer's. And let's face it, honey, the genes are there. I could get Alzheimer's. But I've got good news for you. What I've learned from this disease of Alzheimer's, I ain't going to know what's going on anyway. So you've got 3 options. You could do a Thelma and Louise, and assuming you're in good shape and agile enough, you could try to dive out of the driver's seat at the last minute as I go flying off, and I'm probably thinking it's a wonderful view. That's all I know at the time. The Indians apparently used to leave people out in the wilderness and kind of tell them they'd be right back, and I don't think they ever showed back, but that's okay. And then I read something about the Vikings. They used to put people on small rafts and kind of shove them out in the ocean and let the tide take out, and then add the insult to injury, they'd shoot flaming arrows at them. That could be an option. But all kidding aside, folks, this nursing home business is a serious issue. But I'm not going to leave you hanging. Today we got a really interesting show. In fact, when I come back, we're going to be talking to a former nursing home administrator, someone with over 30 years of experience. And what she's going to share with us is the 4 ways to pay for a nursing home and exactly what you need to do to be prepared for either yourself or a loved one to deal with this potentially inevitable situation of living too long and, yes, possibly having to go into a nursing home. And then following that segment, we've got good news because we're going to show you how you can equip yourself to try to deal with the loss of income or net worth as a result of a nursing home. So you stay tuned. We've got good news for you. You're watching the WorryFree Retirement. I'm Tony Walker. I'll be right back.
With people living longer than ever before, Americans are now faced with the real possibility of running out of money in retirement. But there is a solution to this problem. Nationally recognized retirement specialist Tony Walker will show you how to make your 401k last as long as you do. Monday, September 10th at 6 p.m. right here in Louisville. Learn the 4 major financial risks to living longer and how to avoid them. Monday, September 10th. Register now and log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. That's TonyWalkerFinancial.com.
With us in the studio is someone who has worked in the long-term care industry for 30-plus years as an administrator, both in the profit and nonprofit arena, and written many policies and procedures related to compliance. She has excellent working knowledge of Medicare, Medicaid, and Medicare replacement policies, and served on the board of directors for Leading Age of Indiana for 8-plus years, as well as the board of American College of Nursing Home Administrators. As well, she was awarded the Administrator of the Year in 2009. Ms. Everett is currently retired, but staying very active, involving herself in seminars, teaching, and of course, working with upcoming administrators. Our guest today, Ms. Jill Everett. Jill, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Tony.
And we're on the long-term care issue. You've been on the front lines as an administrator for years. Tell us basically what is someone to expect in terms of going into a nursing home, and basically the 4 ways, the 4 only options there is for paying for a nursing home stay.
Okay, the 4 main payer types, Tony, are Medicare, Medicaid, out-of-pocket private pay, and long-term care insurance.
Okay, so let's set the stage. We've got a 65-year-old. Maybe the 65-year-old has $400,000 or $500,000 in a 401k. Their house is paid for, their cars are paid for. They got a couple $100,000 in a brokerage account, $50,000 in savings. One of them is faced with the decision of putting a spouse into a nursing home. Surely that's enough money, isn't it, Jill?
Well, it sounds like it's enough money, but a lot of people don't know what the real costs are. I mean, room and board for a nursing home patient for a private room can run anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000 a month just for the room. That doesn't include medicine, that doesn't include therapy, that doesn't include a lot of other things. So that adds up really quickly.
So could you be as high as $10,000 to $12,000 a month? I mean, when you bring all of that into the fray, I mean, could it be that high potentially?
It could be $10,000 to $15,000 a month.
And you even mentioned that, I hadn't thought of this, you even have additional costs you don't think about. You've said that even sometimes, because it is weary, I realize that, for family members to take care of a person in a nursing home, that they'll even hire people to come in and sit. I mean, that's another $20, $25 an hour, right?
At least, depending again on the market, it could be. But and because no one wants to leave their loved one alone in the nursing home, so a lot of people want to do it, but they don't know what it costs.
And so let's think about this then. We've got two probably groups of people out there watching this program, Jill. Let's take the age group in the 50s, early 50s, and they're sitting there saying, well, I'm not ever going to go in a nursing home. That's years from now. What would you say to them as a concern for them and their family?
Sit down and talk with your mom and dad. If you have aging parents who are in their 70s or 80s, you need to know what they have. You need to know, do they have Medicare and a supplement policy, or do they have a Medicare replacement policy? Two totally different things, total different out-of-pocket expenses come with those. It's important to know that, because when you're in the midst of having to make that difficult decision, you don't want to be trying to figure out the finances too.
Okay, so then you mentioned the 70 to 80-year-olds. A 70-year-old, let's say husband and wife, that are in very good health right now, they might be thinking the same thing. Why in the world do I need to plan for some sort of long-term care stay? What would you say to the 70-year-old couple that thinks they don't need to do anything right now?
The same thing. Sit down with your kids and tell them what you've done, what your planning has been. You know, do you have Medicare and traditional insurance, supplement? Do you have a replacement plan? At what point do you have to start paying the out-of-pocket expenses? Because they're all different. And just because the one that Aunt Georgia had doesn't mean that's going to be the same one that your mom and dad have. So sit down and talk. It's the best advice that I can give anybody.
Well, thank you, Jill. It's been great getting this information. And folks, basically we're coming back to the next segment, and what we're going to do is deal with one of those major issues of trying to pay for long-term care, and that is insurance. We're going to have someone from Tony Walker Financial to address that in just a minute. You stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Are you retired or retiring soon? Can you afford for your money to take a hit with the stock market being so volatile these days? Nobody can time the market, but having a retirement game plan with Tony Walker Financial gives you peace of mind and sleep insurance. Learn how to prevent losses in your retirement accounts and plan your retirement around an income you can never outlive. Log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com today to schedule a personal meeting with Tony to secure your hard-earned money. That's TonyWalkerFinancial.com.
Hi, I'm fiduciary and television show host Tony Walker, inviting you to my newest presentation, Monday, September 10th at 6 o'clock, right here in Louisville. Learn the 4 biggest risks to your IRA and 401k and how to ensure that your income in retirement will last as long as you do. My presentation is free, but registration is required. So log on now to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. That's TonyWalkerFinancial.com. Welcome back to the Worry-Free Retirement. Hope you're enjoying today's program. And with us in the studio is a rare treat, my favorite son-in-law and a person in charge of our life insurance and long-term care department here at Tony Walker Financial, Mr. Trey Juergens. How you doing, Trey?
Good, Tony. How are you?
I'm doing great. Good to have you on the show. We're on a limited time crunch here, and we got a lot of stuff to cover. But before we get into the show, my favorite and only granddaughter, Scout, who every time I come over, she's asleep lately. What is the deal with that?
She's a growing girl.
But Lacey sends us pictures. She sends us pictures, and I don't understand. What is this picture all about? Aaron, throw this up on screen. What is going on with Lacey and Scout here?
Lacey is obsessed with taking these photos on Instagram, and here lately she's wanted her to be a brand rep for this little shop that she gets these clothes from. So the whopping return for her cute little pictures is 40% off. So I guess that's better than nothing.
And you know how that works is, yeah, but it was on sale, Dad. So now I said, Lacey, this is a good gig for this lady. She's got you on the Instagram thing. You're going to buy more clothes. So I guess they both win. But all right, so we're talking about long-term care. We had our last guest on, Miss Everett, talking about the 4 types of ways to pay for it. we're going to cover one of those, which is private insurance. So Trey, and watch this closely, folks, because we're going to have a solution for you. But Trey, how do the 3 different types of private insurances we offer work, and how can people take advantage of our services?
Sure, we really do have 3 ways we can help kind of offset those costs of long-term care with private insurance. The first is traditional long-term care insurance. So that is the most beneficial in terms of offsetting those costs completely. The second is life insurance with long-term care riders or chronic illness riders. That's really just accelerated death benefit. Lastly are annuity products. There's annuity products. I know you're very familiar with those products, but they actually include, for a small fee, the ability to double or increase the payments, mailbox money, if you will, to help offset those costs as well. So
let's go over, for instance, my mother-in-law, who I dearly loved, recently passed away. Let's talk about individual long-term care insurance. And again, folks, this is a great type of policy to have, but sometimes, and in her case, this happened. Explain that product, and after explaining it, I'd like to share that my beloved mother-in-law, Dee Dee, never collected a dime, and why was that?
Right. So with a traditional long-term care policy, I've got an example here, and we'll show this. For a healthy 65-year-old couple, male and female, that are, again, pretty healthy, this is a policy that's traditional long-term care. What it includes is what's called an elimination period, and this elimination period in this case is 90 days. It could be up to 120 days in some cases. But with that exclusion period, what it does is it does not kick in reimbursement payments until you reach that time. So for this couple, it's $8,500 a year for this policy, and they might not ever see a return of premium.
So you could pay $8,500 a year, and obviously if you do collect on it, it's a great deal. But just like Dee Dee, you may not get a dime on it,
That's
depending
right.
on when you die. Okay. What's the second type? And we do a lot more of this, obviously. Explain this product.
Correct. The second product is a hybrid product. What it is it's really life insurance that includes long-term care protection. So some of them call it a chronic illness rider, some of them call it an accelerated death benefit. But for this same couple, we ran some numbers. The benefit that they would receive, no matter what, is $108,000 of death benefit tax-free to their heirs.
308, right?
Correct.
308, I think.
$308,000 to their beneficiaries. But the best part of that is they can accelerate that death benefit should they have some long-term care costs. So they can access up to 100% of that, either monthly or annually lump sum, to offset costs that they might need in long-term care.
So we think about this, these newer hybrid products, which to me sound a little more appealing. You can have your cake and eat it too, because let's say you don't ever go into long-term care. You're going to eventually die. That's a fact. So somebody's going to get a large tax-free death benefit. But if you do go into some sort of facility, or I guess, does it provide some for home health care depending on what your ability to function?
That's the best part of
Okay.
these products. It pays as an indemnity, which means you can use this money for what you need to use it for. It's not a reimbursement payment where you have to pay a healthcare facility. You can pay your niece if she's the one providing healthcare. You can remodel your home to accommodate for a wheelchair, etc.
That's awesome. So yeah, because a lot of people don't want to go in a nursing home. Maybe they have the ability or family to take care of people, and I guess so. Yeah, that's a good idea. You got to build a ramp. You got to do this. You got to do that. Maybe you don't need licensed professionals. With an indemnity policy, it would still pay, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, the third, and this is one of my favorite. As you know, they like to call me the annuity king around here, so I love annuities. And then in the last 5 or 6 years, they've started adding, we kid around about that. What do we really call it? Different companies call it different things. But we're kicking in mailbox money. Incidentally, folks, the Mailbox Money for Life booklet, put that up full screen, Aaron. Mailbox money is guaranteed income you can never outlive. We'd be happy to mail you a free copy of this book. Also, we have the Annuity Decision Guide for savers. It talks about these opportunities to get not only lifetime income, but what we're talking about now, if you had a long-term care situation, potentially, depending on the contract, they could double that income.
That's right.
So where do you see this playing out, Trey, with a lot of people coming to us? And what is the real advantage of this, particularly if we're getting into health issues? Why don't you address that briefly?
That's right. Like I mentioned, those first 2 examples were a pretty healthy 65-year-old couple, and some of the times clients aren't necessarily in the best of health. So with those annuity policy, there is no underwriting. There is no health obligation that they have to go through, any physical, nothing like that. The annuity actually includes that for a small fee to double or increase that mailbox money payment so they can help offset some of those costs.
A good deal. All right, thanks, Trey. Well, folks, if you'd like to take advantage of our services for no cost or obligation, we'll be happy to have Trey run these for you. You can look at long-term care insurance. You can look at the new hybrid life insurance policies with accelerated death benefits. And of course, there's always the good old-fashioned annuities that we've come to love that include these riders, which can actually increase your mailbox money for a certain period of time should you have an illness or an accident that warrants this. It's easy to do. Why don't you do this? You can either call our office at 877-499-WALK or log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. Or if you want to email Trey directly, his email is Trey, Trey, at TonyWalkerFinancial.com. Well, what does the Bible have to say about this fear of the unknown or going into nursing homes or any other fear you might be experiencing? I'm going to talk about that specifically. Some very, very encouraging words coming up. But as you know, I got to run and get me a cup of coffee. I'll be right back.
Are you retired or retiring soon? Do you have a 401k, IRA, Thrift Savings Account, 403b, or lump sum pension that you'd like to move to safer territory? Did you know that all the money you see on your 401k statement isn't really yours? Depending on your overall taxable income, the government has essentially a lien on your 401k that can tax as much as 40% of your money when you go to take it out. Tony Walker calls this the 401k tax tumor. For over 33 years, retirement specialist Tony Walker has helped thousands of savers worry less about money by creating game plans to deal with your tax tumor. Get control of your retirement by controlling the taxes owed on it. Schedule a free meeting to see if you can reduce your tax tumor and provide a guaranteed income you can never outlive. To get started, simply log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. That's TonyWalkerFinancial.com.
Good cup of coffee on this beautiful morning. We are filming this show in our new Louisville studios. Today's date is August 14th, 2018. We're glad you're with us. Hope you're enjoying the new set here. Again, Aaron and his faithful sidekick. We have two sidekicks running around here. Matt, just doing a wonderful job with the TV show. So we're talking about fear. So let me ask you a question. What is your greatest fear? Is there anything in life that kind of keeps you up at night? Anything that you're worried about that could happen in the future or maybe even today? Of course, your biggest fear may not be winding up in a nursing home like some people's, but assuming you're like any other red-blooded American walking around out there, you probably fear something of the unknown. We've got to admit this. And then sometimes these fears, I think that's the whole problem. The biggest thing I learned in my life is sometimes I've got to admit I've got certain fears that I myself am not equipped to handle. But you know what the good news is? God can. And I've learned over the years, I'm not the most humble person. A lot of times I'm kind of a can-do guy and I want to do it on my own. But what I've realized, one of the easiest remedies for my fears is something called prayer. By the way, our company currently sponsors Kentucky native and LPGA professional golfer Emma Talley. And to advertise our sponsorship of Emma, I decided to cut a 30-second commercial on my home golf course there in Bowling Green. A friend of mine saw the ad and he said, "Hey, Tony, that's a real good ad of you out there golfing, but hey, you're playing by yourself. How come you're not playing with anybody?" And I said, "Well, sometimes I do play by myself and I walk around by myself." And he said, "Well, that's kind of odd. You're not playing with anybody?" And actually, I kind of laughed and I said, "Well, let me correct that. I am playing with somebody and his name is God." And he went, "Huh?" I said, "Yeah, the God that I play with never laughs at me when I hit one out of bounds like some of my buddies. He's really generous with mulligans, okay? And best of all, this God of mine never keeps score." So I said to this gentleman, God has taught me a lot about solitude. You know, sometimes the best prayer is not necessarily sitting in church, although you can certainly pray there. Sometimes the best prayer is by ourselves, whether it's sitting at home alone, or I can even pray hitting a 9-iron, believe it or not. Jesus talked about this. Aaron, let's put up this verse of Scripture. It's actually Matthew 6:6. Jesus addresses this idea of praying in private when he says, "But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." David, I love King David. Man, he was a guy that really botched it a time or two. David says this, and you may have heard something similar to this whenever you've attended a funeral. It's a very famous statement belched out at funerals all the time, but it's a good one. Psalm 23:4 says, and I really believe this, is when we pray, this is what David's basically saying. He says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Now let me stop there. Folks, somebody in all seriousness could be watching this show right now in very, very serious times, whether it's emotional, physical. I don't know what's going on in you, but here's what David would say. He says, I fear no evil. He's saying that even in his loneliest times, maybe his sickest times, maybe his most dreadful times, he's saying, I don't fear anything. Because why? He says God's rod and God's staff, they comforted him. And here's the best part. David slides on down to verse 6 and says, because, here's why he doesn't fear, he knows that in the end, he will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Man, what encouraging words those are. Well, how about you? You might be sitting there saying, I'm fearful right now, Tony, of my money, my future. I don't feel like I've got anybody I can trust. Well, I would say, don't just sit there and not do anything. Take action. And the best thing you can do right now is be encouraged that I'm here at Tony Walker Financial to personally meet with you to discuss your specific concerns and worries for the future. And best of all, it's absolutely free to meet. There is absolutely no cost or obligation. We meet with savers each and every day, and our mission in life is to help them worry less about money. And you know what? We're really good at it. So you have nothing to lose and possibly everything to gain to overcome your worries. All you got to do is log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. And when there, all you do is click on the Let's Get Started button. Incidentally, you could even call our office now toll-free 24/7 at 877-499-9255, and we will be happy to set up a time at either our Bowling Green, Kentucky office or our newest office at 8303 Shelbyville Road in Louisville, Kentucky. At that first appointment, all we do is just sit down and talk for about 30 minutes. You'll bring in your information. I'll use my 34 plus years of experience in the financial trenches to go through that. And then we will have a second appointment. Now, during that second appointment, I will provide, this is the best news of all, folks, when it comes to financial advisors. I provide a free written assessment. You do not get this from any place else. I know this because many of you are coming around and you're talking all over town, and I don't see anything in writing. Many of you have even said this, which this is crazy, I think. People are wanting you to invest money with them before they show you anything in writing, and they never give you an opportunity to study that. Folks, don't fall for that trap. That's dangerous indeed, and you should be fearful of anything like that. Get it in writing first, and we will do that, and we will give you ample opportunity to consider whether you want to work with Tony Walker Financial. Incidentally, if you drop by either of our offices, pick up a free starter kit, or you can grab one of these brand new Annuity Decision Guide for Savers. They're absolutely free. Our offices are open Monday through Thursday at either 2451 Industrial Drive or again at 8303 Shelbyville Road. It's just down from Oxmoor Mall there in Louisville. Well, we hope you've enjoyed today's show. I've really enjoyed bringing it to you. You remember, if all else fails, you be worry-free. You make it a good one.
Thank you for watching the Worry-Free Retirement with Tony Walker. If you need a safe and simple game plan for your retirement, log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com and schedule a free, no-obligation meeting with Tony.